Thank you very much, Mr. President. It's late, Mr. President, so I will truncate much of what I would have wanted to say on this debate. But there are a couple of points that I consider it important to address, and thank you for inviting me to speak on the bill which is before this House, this chamber, this evening. A bill to fund urgent and critical recurrent and capital expenditure to September 24 in areas where insufficient or no allocation was provided. Mr. President, on head number 23, which falls under my remit, there are 4 heads of expenditure which fall to be addressed. Anti-money laundering and combating the financing of terrorism, AML CFT compliance unit, $360,000. Other contracted services, $1 million to pay money owed to a company called Axial for the maintenance of software at the company's registry. 3, with respect to the Police Complaints Authority, the sum of $2,940,000 to enable the authority to meet its operational costs. And lastly, recurrent expenditure on legal fees of $120 million, which the Honorable Independent Senator has just spoken to in some critical measure. Let me address that last point first, Mr. President, and then I will return to the other heads of expenditure that I would like your leave to deal with, albeit briefly. I understand the Senator, Independent Senator, to have made 2 points under the head of the supplementation for $120 million for legal fees, or with respect to that larger supplementation. And the point that she made was it is not right for lawyers to remain anonymous, and secondly, we should stop talking about people going to court. That is wrong, it is their right. And I understand those 2 points to have been made in the context of the responses that I've already made in the other place with respect to legal expenditure. First of all, that it is not right for lawyers to be anonymous. The point is that I have given the material before the other place, and I'm not going to repeat myself. We have asked for $120 million to September 2024. At June 6, 2024, the total amount of outstanding legal fees came up to $70,828,722.38. And there is still legal work which the Solicitor General's Department, the Chief State Solicitor, and Attorney General's Secretariat have engaged attorneys for, who have not yet billed my office, and these hopefully will be paid with the supplementation to take us up to the $120 million. In giving those figures, I have declined to name the names of the attorneys other than those who have given consent, and those names are now in the public domain. They have been published elsewhere in the context of my having given them in the other place. But the short point is, it is not that lawyers are being held out as being anonymous. The point is this: the taxpayers' funds that are being expended on lawyers' fees are legitimate expenses, and the sums have been given. I have accounted for it in the other place. I called the figure here today, and to the extent that there were some lawyers who agreed for their names to be given, I have given that figure. That figure is in respect of those lawyers who have agreed to give their names. I have given those figures. And those lawyers who have not agreed to give their names or who did not respond to my request for their consent, I have not given their names, but I have given the gross sums that have been paid out, and that comes to the $72 million figure that I have referred to this evening. What I am not prepared to do is to name attorneys, to have their names, as I've said in the other place, pilloried in this place or elsewhere, because what we engage in, and I say this respectfully, I say it regrettably, what we engage in this chamber and in the other place from the opposition is movelang and pillorying of people's names. And insofar as there is a responsibility on the part of the Office of the Attorney General to disclose the sums of taxpayers' money that is paid out pursuant to an obligation to pay legal fees, I have put that figure out into the public domain as a gross sum, and at the end of the day, I justify it on the basis of legitimate fees that are being paid out for legitimate work. This is not, with respect, the same as other instances of fees that have been paid out under other administrations, not this administration, and in respect of which, as we speak, there are current legal matters in which we are seeking to recover those fees which have gone into bank accounts. The fees, and I stand here and I challenge anyone to challenge me on this, the fees which I have authorized to pay out to lawyers are being paid to legitimate bona fide lawyers who are skilled, competent, and have integrity. And none of those fees are going to be paid back to me. Not a single cent. And I will challenge any one of the members on the other bench, anyone on the other bench, and the clients are alive, to suggest that any of those fees are being paid back to me. And the reason why I am not going to put the attorneys' names into this gael is because it is all about movelang and bad-talking people who are prepared to do hard work for an honest day's pay. And then I say, with respect to the other, and let me say this, Mr. President, on the criticism of the sum of money for foreign legal fees. A significant part of the foreign legal fees are being paid in English sterling to attorneys that I have had to retain from the United Kingdom to prosecute some of those cases that are currently in this court, in which we are tracing them back to bank accounts. And that comes at an expense. On the criticism of the independent senator that we should stop talking about people to go into court as if it is wrong. I have said in the other place, and I say it again, that the opposition, and I don't suggest that the independent senator is part of that, the opposition has been obstructionist for the last several years. And they have found, because regrettably our court system is slow, they have found that it is convenient for them to conduct their political mischief in the courts of law. So that an example of the obstructionism, and we are not going to roll over and play dead, an example of the obstructionism is the extent to which during the COVID period, we had 51 legal cases brought against the government, challenging this government's fight to protect the health of this population. Those 51 cases, Mr. President, cost the taxpayers $14,620,340, paid to attorneys representing, UNC attorneys representing those persons. And at the end of the day, it is not that we are saying that people are being told that they shouldn't go to court. It is that they are being forcing the government to pay out legal fees in cases which, at the end of the day, they all failed colossally. But we could not roll over and not defend them. So we had to pay out $14,620,340,000 to retain attorneys. And that series of 15 cases ended in the case of the Dominic Suraj decision, which is now one of the constitutional law cases that stands as a high watermark in our constitutional law that has demonstrated two things in particular. One is that it is the right of a government under the system of constitution that we adhere to pass legislation by a simple majority decision in the parliament, and not every piece of legislation has to go to a supermajority. That has freed us as a government over the last couple of years as a result of this Dominic Suraj decision to be able to pass legislation in the interests of the people of this country. But it cost us $14 million to get there because of the litigation that was brought by United National Congress lawyers to prevent this government from protecting the health of the public. Because the Dominic Suraj decision ruled, secondly, apart from the high watermark of the constitutional ethos that it has developed, ruled that the government was correct in every step that it took over the COVID pandemic to protect the health of the population. And in fact, that decision was remarkable for the Privy Council going out of its way in the body of its judgment to pay tribute to our Minister of Health, Dr. the Honorable Terence Dayal Singh, and to our Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Roshan Parasram.
You gave Terence a title, doctor.
And they choose every opportunity to interrupt.
Okay. Members.
Give Terence a new title.
Yeah.
Senator Mark. AG.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. If I had the opportunity to, I would confer him with an honorary doctorate. And the Privy Council went out of its way, unusually, because the Privy Council is always very careful to stick close to the bone of the wicket so as not to get involved in hyperbole. But in this judgment, they spent 3 paragraphs of a judgment into 2 full pages, praising the efforts of the Honorable Mr. Terence Dayal Singh, Minister of Health, and Dr. Roshan Parasram, the Chief Medical Officer, for the Herculean efforts they made to save the country of Trinidad and Tobago and its people, who the United National Congress tried to stop the government from providing health care to, at the cost of $14 million. And if that litigation had not been engaged in, can we imagine the quality of further service that would have gone to the health services with the $14 million being spent in health services? So those are the remarks that I will make without belaboring the point that I've already made, Mr. President, with respect to the legal fees issue. And I make no apologies for having authorized the payment of that sum that I have already called, and asking the Minister of Finance to come to this House for a supplementation for the balance up to the tune of $120 million, because those fees are going to be paid to bona fide lawyers for bona fide work, and work that this country needs them to do to continue to protect the Constitution, the rule of law, and the citizens of this country. The other points that I want to make, Mr. President, and I will be as brief as I can be, with respect to the area of recurrent expenditure under Head 23 of $124,300,000. We are dealing with anti-money laundering and others. Anti-money laundering, I want to make the very briefly the remarks about the CFATF Secretariat. CFATF is the acronym for the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force. That is an organization, Mr. President, which is helping this country work very seriously at keeping us free from white-collar crime, anti-money laundering, countering terrorism, and related serious crime, to keep the generation of our citizenry and the generation of children of this proud country in trust, for whom we manage this country. Literally yesterday, Mr. President, I gave opening remarks at a very important anti-money laundering and countering financing of terrorism national risk assessment workshop that is taking place at the Hyatt Hotel. And this is what I said yesterday in my opening remarks. And this has to do with the existence of the CFATF Secretariat that the government is asking this Parliament to pay, to authorize us an additional $360,000 for, to pay their rent. I said this: the challenges posed by money laundering and the financing of terrorism are not merely theoretical concerns. They represent real threats to our national security, economic and financial stability, and maintaining the rule of law. As guardians of justice and stewards of public trust, it is incumbent upon us to combat these threats with unwavering resolve and collective action to protect the financial system and the broader economy from the threats of illicit finance. Illicit finance fuels serious crime, corruption, bribery, fraud and forgery, drug trafficking, human trafficking, tax evasion and cybercrime, including online child sex exploitation, terrorism, and gang-related activity. It erodes the integrity of our international financial system and hinders serious economic growth and social development. And the National Risk Assessment Workshop, which is ongoing at the moment, is being co-sponsored by the World Bank Group, along with the Office of the Attorney General and Ministry of Legal Affairs, supported by the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force, for whose office we are asking this House to supplement by $360,000 so that we can continue to pay their rent. They employ in excess of 90 nationals of this country, and they provide invaluable service to the citizens of this country and keeping us in train with our international obligations. The other area, Mr. President, that I want to speak to very briefly has to do with the Registrar General's Department. We have the vote for Axel. We are asking for a vote to continue the software development of Axel, which is assisting the Registrar General's Department. And one of the very important areas in which the efforts of the Registrar General is engaged is in developing the legislative framework for the beneficial ownership framework that allows us to go behind the corporate veil of companies behind which so many people have for so many years continued to engage in white-collar crime and money laundering, countering terrorism and related serious crime. We can now, through the legislative provisions that we have introduced, go after persons because they have to tell us under the legislative scheme that the Registrar General is introducing through the digitalized software apparatus that Axel brings to that ministry, to our ministry. They now have to reveal who they are. They can no longer hide behind a corporate veil. The other area, Mr. President, that I have asked for supplementation of funds for is the Police Complaints Authority. And I want to say just a little bit about the Police Complaints Authority in that respect, Mr. President. Among the many things that the Police Complaints Authority is asking us to engage in, and the supplementation is to the tune of $2,940,000, is significantly a pilot project that they are introducing, and I consider this to be very important, a pilot project that they're introducing so as to be able to allow them to use portable cameras, body-worn cameras, that will permit them to be able to monitor on an ongoing basis what is being done as they go out into the field. This is a very important project. It is a small part of the 2 million. I could speak in detail to all of the other things that they want to do, but I will not trouble this House with all of those details, and I entirely support the efforts of the Police Complaints Authority to go into that field of body-worn cameras to monitor the field, extensive field work that they're doing. And lastly, Mr. President, the last area that I just want to touch on to emphasize in terms of the work that we are asking this House to approve is the AML CFT compliance of 360, which I've already spoken with, to enhance our capacity to go after white-collar crime. With those few words, Mr. President, I thank you.